And hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Podcaster Nation. And I say welcome back because I know that you're listening to all of our other episodes before this one, and you're just keeping on going because you're enthralled. You're totally into this podcast. You're listening to all these other podcasters telling their stories, and you just want more. Let me tell you something. One of the goals of this podcast is to bring in unique people with unique podcasts. And this is a new one for me. I've never heard of this type of thing before. And when I did, I was blown away. I listened to several episodes and it's been very educational. And I was really surprised that there was someone out here doing this, but this guy's doing it beautifully. So you're going to really enjoy this episode. Before we get going, I want to make sure I say thank you to everybody for all of the messages, all of jumping in, all of the well wishes. Folks, you folks have really been supportive on what we've been doing here. Thank you for jumping in our movement and our Facebook group. It's free. If you're a podcaster, please jump in and join it. Standing invite, and that is the Podcaster Nation on Facebook groups. Join us there. We're networking, we're interviewing each other, we're getting things rolling. All right. Now, without further ado, let me introduce the host of the Outbreak News Interviews podcast. I know you're already on the edge of your seat wondering what's going on with this. And please welcome Robert Herriman. Robert, how you doing?
Hey, Rory. Thanks for having me.
Oh, thanks for being on. When you and I first connected, I looked you up. I looked at the podcast, and I was like, "Really? This is about viruses and stuff like." I mean, I was enthralled. I'm like, "You're kidding." I gotta know. I'm sure the listeners want to know who are you? Where do you come from? What's your background? So on and so forth. Why are you into this particular subject matter?
Mhm.
And what's your mission with doing this? Because this is a very well established podcast at this point, and you've been doing it for a while.
Yeah, yeah. I've been doing the podcast since about 2017. And prior to that, I used to do a weekly radio show in Tampa, Florida called Outbreak News This Week. And I started accumulating all these interviews. And then at some point, trying to get through traffic to get to the radio station at a specified time became such a burden. I said, well, why don't I just do this at home and I don't have to worry about it? I can schedule on my own. And so I started doing podcasts instead. Um, I am a microbiologist by training, um, master's level. And it's a great topic. It's ever evolving. And especially in recent years, it's made mainstream news a lot. So I've been doing stuff like what you've been seeing on mainstream news for the past several years. I've been doing it for about 10 years now. Um, and yeah, just enjoy it and just want to try to educate people. It's primarily, scientists listen to the podcast, but I try to gear it toward the layperson as much as I can.
I was wondering about that, who your target market was, because
Mm.
now your interviews are mostly with professional folks in this field or related.
Yeah, yeah. The vast majority of the interviews are with people either from the government, whether it be the CDC, the FDA, or a state health department. I also talk to a lot of people in academia, so PhDs and MDs and stuff in academia. People that I'm scouring papers and articles and stuff, and oh, this one sounds interesting, and I'll just contact them, and 98% of the time they say yes. I rarely get turned down. Um, and then the other group of people are what I would call the advocates, and that would be a good example would be there's an organism called Naegleria fowleri. Some of your audience may not be familiar with it, but you may be familiar with it as what the media calls it, the brain eating amoeba. And what happens is it affects young children predominantly, and it's 97% fatal. So these parents that lose their children end up starting these groups and try to educate other parents and other people about how to avoid going through what they went through. So I call those the advocates, and they're some of the greatest people to interview also because they've been there, they did it, and they're suffering and they're dealing with the pain and they want to prevent others from going through that. Yeah.
Wow. No, and I apologize. I haven't had a chance to hear those episodes yet.
Mhm.
I've heard some of your solos, on there.
Mhm.
I'm definitely gonna go back and listen to one of those. Okay, and just to kind of see, how different it is. It made an impression on me that during your single episodes, when your soliloquy episodes, when it's
Mhm.
just you talking about the news and what's happening, you're very objective,
Mhm.
and you're educational. And so there isn't any, fear mongering or, panicking or, almost even opinion on it. It's very, very straightforward.
Mhm.
Like you said, it sounds like you're talking to the layman, like with an alert going, hey, folks in Illinois, watch out for this, thing coming from
Right.
raccoon. I heard that one.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So, and that struck me. Now with the advocates, when they come on, how does that go? Because these are people who have been impacted personally. So I would imagine that episode has a little more personal slant to it.
Sure. Well, they typically go through the story. For example, I had one individual. They went to Costa Rica on a vacation, went into a hot spring, go swimming, returned to Orlando, and their 11-year-old son started, going through like a meningitis type situation, and they eventually determined he had this parasite in his brain, and he lost a child. So they started an advocacy group, and I don't do that. I don't contact them when this actually happens. They have to have something set up, and I could see that they're ready for the media. And I've actually had one parent who started an advocacy group. Uh, in 2019, they had me go to Orlando for the Amoeba Summit. So there you go, the Amoeba Summit 2019, and they gave me a whole room, and I did like 9 or 10 interviews straight, video interviews of different experts they had speaking. They would speak, and then they would be funneled into my room for a 10-minute interview. So it was really, really cool. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. I mean, I'm definitely going to tune back in to listen to some of those because that's very interesting.
Yeah.
That you have those different aspects to your program.
Hmm.
I expected the professional part of it. I
Yeah.
didn't expect the advocate part of it. That's different.
Yeah. Yeah. But because, I mean, the professional part is I read a study. Oh, this sounds like an interesting thing to talk about. I contact the author of that study, whether it be here in the States. I've done interviews with people in the Philippines, in India, in the UK. Uh, Recently, I talked to somebody from Pakistan. So it's wide open, and that's the great thing about the internet these days. You can just talk to anybody about this stuff, and it's just it's a lot of fun.
Yeah. No, you're well established here. You told me beforehand that was it the podcast that started in 2017?
Yes,
Okay, and before that, you were on the radio talking about the same subject matter.
correct. It,
Okay.
it would be an hour-long show. I would typically have one guest in the first half hour, and if in whatever time was left after that, during that half hour, I would just talk about other news and other thing that's going on. Go into the second half hour, and it would be another guest, and same thing. So yeah, it was fun. I actually missed doing the radio. That was a blast.
Radio's different, isn't
Yeah, yeah.
it?
But I had that hour slot, and it was like right after work, and it was a bear with the Tampa traffic to get there sometimes. So
No, I imagine. I
yeah,
imagine.
yeah.
But yeah, my son spent some time in Tampa, and that's one of the first things he mentioned was rush hour.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, so many people are moving here. It's just it's off the charts now.
Yeah. All right. No, that's a long time to be doing any activity at all, let alone podcasting. So kudos to you, first of all, because congrats on the longevity. That's fantastic. What I don't want to just say what's your purpose, okay? Because clearly your purpose is to inform, but sort of behind that, what makes somebody want to spread this sort of information out? I mean, what drives you to keep going with this subject matter to inform the public?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? For so
Well,
long,
yeah.
especially.
Well, yeah. You can't do this, and you're going to learn over time. You can't do this without having a passion for whatever you're doing. So if you have that, because I'm not making any money. This is strictly a hobby.
Oh wow,
And
okay.
yeah, yeah. So if maybe I could, I mean, I'm probably a little bit on YouTube, but that's about it. But that's not even the goal. The goal is just and I love talking to people too. And that's always a blast. Some of the interviews last 10 minutes, depending on how much of the topic we want to get into. I've also done some that are an hour and a half. A good example would be something I'm very, there's certain diseases I have a lot of passion for. One is, of course, the brain-eating amoeba. Another one is rabies. Have a lot of passion about that. I worked for the state health department at one time, and rabies was under my purview there. So I was, knee deep in it, to say the least. And every September 28th, so it is coming up, there's a World Rabies Day. And a few years ago, I got a couple experts to come on, and we did a live stream on YouTube, Facebook. It got promoted by the Global Rabies Alliance. It was a big thing. And we did a hour and a half Q&A, took questions from people on social media. So, I mean, there's just so much you can do with this medium, you know what I'm saying? And it's just a blast. And hopefully somebody's learning something.
And so this is a passion of yours. I mean, it's your
Correct.
field of study. So I guess I'm not surprised to hear that.
Yeah.
You're certainly qualified for it. But
Yeah.
so informing people, is that kind of the purpose of it? Spreading that knowledge to folks who don't have your background in education, that kind of thing.
Yeah. That's a large part of it. And the other part is just, especially if I come up with something unusual, if I see a study, for example, I saw one that this professor out of Australia did a study of somebody getting, an STD from a pool or something, something that's really obscure.
Yeah.
I would bring them on just because of the obscurity of this and listen to how they came to these conclusions and that kind of stuff. But yeah, mostly it's just educational. I can't say there's a whole lot of entertainment value to it, but I guess it depends how you look at it.
When I first heard about it, I literally said, I never even heard of this. This is literally a podcast about viruses.
Viruses. That's
right?
part of it.
Yeah.
Parasites, bacteria, viruses, fungus, prions. Prions are the things that, like mad cow disease. They're like little proteins that are 100% fatal. So, I just come up with topics and, do my searching and see how it goes. And when things are slow with interviews, I just go ahead and crank out some news stories and, whatever. Yeah.
Sure. As I was telling my wife that, right. I'm like, okay, maybe it's a professional level podcast. It's great. I can't wait to find out more. And then before I interview anybody, I want to obviously listen to their material, and do my own research over here. Mm-hmm. So, but the minute I got into looking at your episodes, I found two, like within minutes, that actually, impacted me personally.
How's that?
Well, the first one was the sushi that you were talking about.
Oh yeah.
Right. And that may seem minor to a lot of folks, but I have two boys that are gigantic, like, huge. Mm-hmm. They do the all you can eat sushi thing all the time. Yeah. And I'm listening to this and I'm going, whoa.
Yeah. Well, I
should send this to them.
But that's the thing is you got to make sure you listen to the whole thing because though I say, sushi, sashimi and worms, oh my, it's not very common here in the US because of the fish is inspected and everything, right? But Japan has thousands of cases of that per year, so you got to put it all in perspective too. So it's not out to scare anybody, but it's just like, oh, this is something that could have, because some people do go out and catch their own grouper or whatever fish, and that's may not always be the wisest idea.
Right. And I got that from the podcast too. I listened to the whole thing. And, I think that you said the one particular thing you were talking about, there's only 10 cases in the United States or something. It was very, very rare. But I also didn't know that it was the flash freezing.
Correct.
I think that you talked about that cured it, or regular freezing for 7 days. Is that right?
Yeah. There's different parameters depending on the temperature and the speed of the temperature. Yeah.
Right. And because, I know how much of that my boys consume, that actually made me feel a lot better. So at first I was like, whoa, I better listen to this. Then I went, oh, they're fine. But I was still interested to go grab it. And then the other one was the about raccoons in Illinois and the rescue shelters. And they were.
I think it was Cryptosporidium.
That
Yeah.
sounds
Yeah.
familiar to me. My
Well,
daughter's heavily involved in rescue, for wild animals, lives in Illinois. And so I'm like, wait a minute. So I'm listening to this one,
mhm.
also. So I think that anybody who wanted to listen to this podcast, if they looked around a little bit, they're going to find something that's going to trigger something in them.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
know,
I
that they're
mean,
going to be interested in.
I got at least 500 episodes. In raccoons, it's really funny because my granddaughter always buys me little toys that are raccoons because they think I have this unrealistic fear of raccoons, not just because of rabies, but because they actually carry a parasite with them, um, called the raccoon roundworm. It's actually Balis ascaris procyanus, and this is just something they carry. So a lot of times, like little kids will go out in the yard and go near a raccoon latrine, and they have all these raccoon eggs, microscopic, you can't see them, but in their feces. And the kid may put their hand in it and put it in their mouth. And then these larvae eventually go to the brain and it can be fatal, or go to the eye and blind you. So, I mean, it's funny because, we got a lot of raccoons down here, sewer raccoons down here in Tampa, and they pop up. And I asked my neighbor about it. And you see all the raccoons last night? He goes, "Yeah, yeah. They're going to the bathroom around my tree." I said, "Well, you need to be careful." I tell them about the parasite. Never had a clue that even existed. Yeah, and most people don't.
Me either.
That's the amazing thing. So I actually do have a podcast on there. It was an all radio show podcast, with this expert out of Purdue, Indiana, right out of Indiana, Purdue University, and he's like the guru for this particular parasite. And it was a fantastic interview. If anybody wants to check it out.
That's amazing to me.
Yeah,
Now I'm from the Midwest, so pardon my ignorance here, but sewer raccoon,
yeah, yeah. That's where they come out of. They come out of the sewer.
they're literally living in the sewer
Yeah,
in
yeah,
Tampa. Wow.
yeah, yeah. And they come
Hadn't
out, and they're huge, and I mean, they're not that cute little raccoon thing that you see out in the wilderness. They're big and ugly, and just want to
living in
avoid
the
them.
sewers. Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah,
So
yeah.
I mean, you could come out looking like a Ninja Turtle or something when they're
Yeah,
all
right.
done. I mean, my goodness. It's funny. My son was in Tampa. I never heard him talk about a sewer raccoon. So
No,
uh,
yeah, it's not something everybody's going to experience, but if you live there, you're eventually going to see it. Yeah,
yeah, that's just so crazy.
yeah,
All of this is fascinating to me, as I started looking at your podcast and stuff, um, like I said, I think anybody who takes a moment just to look through some of the episodes, they'll find something there. But
oh yeah,
you've been doing this now. You mentioned over 500 episodes,
yeah.
and from the dates you're publishing, it looks like they're coming out every few days. Is that right? What's your frequency on publishing?
Uh, I try to do one or two a week. That doesn't always happen. And on good weeks, I'm not like a lot of podcasters where they have this defined schedule, because I have this life also, and it's really hard to do anything
Right.
defined. So I do it as I can, and um, sometimes I'll do 5 a week, sometimes none. It just varies. So it's yeah, I'm definitely an anomaly in the podcasting community. I'm sure you have a set schedule by now, right?
It's funny because the
A lot of people do. Yeah.
best laid plans, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
yeah. I have several projects going on. One of them, I have a very strict schedule. One of them is a radio situation, so the
Oh,
schedule's done for me. And
mhm.
yeah, and then the new projects, and so like
Yeah.
this, and they just sort of take you over for a couple of weeks while you're building them, and then
Yeah.
you try to find a schedule just for your own sanity. So
Yeah.
it's
Yeah. So, I mean, just however it works. I mean, if it was in my business, I would obviously be treating it differently, but
sure.
as a avocation, yeah, I don't worry too much about that.
So now a lot of podcasters, and you haven't monetized yet, from what you said. A lot of folks who haven't yet monetized, they have, they've told me the reason they keep doing it and that they're driven to do it is because of the therapeutic effects of doing
Yeah.
it. Is that
No,
you
no.
then?
Yeah, I'm there. I mean, I think it's just it's a good complement to all the reading I do and everything. So it all kind of like fits into one big plan. And yeah, I mean, and like I said, I do get some monetization. I have a YouTube channel called Outbreak News TV for anybody that's
There you
interested.
go.
Yeah, and it on there it has the video interviews of the podcast that I do, and also just the audio podcast that I used to do at one time, only audio only. I created YouTube videos of that too. I mean, I know that's kind of cheesy, but that's but back in
Not
the
at all.
day, it was kind of like, yeah, all right, well, I want to get it out there, so that's how I'm going to do it. Yeah, because
Sure.
the technology is so much better now. Before it was, if I did a video, I was using Skype, and you had to have a third party application to
Hmm.
use Skype to record it. Now, of course, I use StreamYard, and it's all nice and simple and easy. I have a lot of guests, that are, for lack of a better term, lab rats. So they're not always the most media savvy people, or even technology savvy people. So StreamYard is so simple. You go on there, you plug in your name, check your camera, check your mic, and you're on. So
Right. Yeah.
yeah, but yeah, back in the day, it was a little tougher when I was doing Skype, and it was, yeah, it was too much. Yeah,
I remember Skype. I do remember Skype. Yeah. I
yeah,
started doing this, like I said, I've been doing it for almost 5 years,
yeah, yeah.
but that doesn't take me back to when you were starting it. You were ahead of even me, a few years before I did. And if you're
Oh,
talking 2017, that's
oh, I mean, there were times, because I do have a 9 to 5, and if I can't always get people to interview, after work hours, for example.
right.
And I'd have to, like right now, I'm talking to you during my lunch break, but I'm able to bring in my mic and my camera and my laptop and find a secluded place to do this. But back in the day, I used to download this app on my phone, which would record the phone call, and I would do some of my interviews on that.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and the sound was horrible,
I'll bet it was.
but that's what I had. This was like in 2013, 2014.
Right.
But I got these really good interviews, and I was going to say that the type of, for this field, in my opinion, I'm kind of switching gears here a little bit.
That's where we were going. So you're right on track. You just keep
Okay,
going.
my favorite people to interview, it's not medical doctors, it's not PhD, it's the public health veterinarians. They are just every state has a public health veterinarian, and their knowledge of zoonotic diseases, right? Diseases that are transmitted from animals to humans, which is
Sure.
about 70-80% of the type of diseases that we get. Their knowledge of those diseases and even the history and all that, they are the most knowledgeable people. They're just absolutely amazing. So like with stuff like with anthrax or hantavirus or plague, they're just amazing.
Wow.
And yeah.
Wow. All right. So, I mean, yeah, going back talking about the actual podcasting part then for that,
Mm.
that portion of our audience that, is here because they're podcasters. You started with bare bones. You started with stuff that people can't even relate to anymore. It's like
Correct.
when I do a sales seminar and I talk about using the phone book, people literally look at me and go, "The
Yeah.
what?
Yeah.
The what? You had a what?"
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, phone book. But the Skype. And you say that now, and people are like, "I have no idea what you're talking about. What is Skype? I've never even heard
I
of
don't
it."
even, I don't even know if it still exists. Does it?
I
I
don't
don't
think
know.
so.
Okay. I have no idea.
I love that. So you got started, and it sounds like you took the typical, podcast path of kind of like bare bones, free stuff, using what you could to kind of get
Oh
going.
yeah.
You didn't invest like thousands into a big setup, right, to get
Oh,
started.
Rory, even to today, I got a $50 mic in front of me, and my laptop, and I use a Logi HD camera I put on my laptop.
Love it.
And
Absolutely love it.
that's it. That's it. Because I do a lot of mobile stuff. Sometimes in the past I've gone to conventions and stuff on these topics, and I would do podcasts from there. So I I mean, it looks like you have some good equipment right there. But yeah,
It's
I never.
decent, but it's not high end or
Yeah,
anything.
yeah. Well, it's more high end than me for sure. But I think the best investment I made was in StreamYard. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but
Oh yeah,
the and just the way I've been doing it for using that for 2 years now, and just the way they've been improving over time and adding more features and stuff has been amazing. And because I'm uh, not incredibly technically savvy, its simplicity is fantastic. It works for me really well.
So for the layman, if you've used Zoom before or not, is there a particular advantage to StreamYard over, say, a Zoom that you're aware of, or that made you go to StreamYard?
No, I went right to StreamYard from
Oh, you
Skype.
did. Okay.
Yeah,
Oh, wow.
yeah.
All right.
So I never messed with Zoom or anything like that.
Yeah.
I may have had a period where I did audio only too. I don't exactly remember, but yeah,
Yeah. No,
yeah,
I like to ask these questions. I'm a big proponent of the idea that, do not spend a whole lot of money when you start podcasting. Do not buy the big setup. I tell everybody, do 10 episodes, see if you like it.
yeah.
If you do 10 more. Okay. When you're at 20, if you want to buy something, go spend a few bucks. But until then, because most people, by the time they get to 20, they either love it or they're like, absolutely no way. This is not what I thought it was. I'm out the door.
Well, because in the beginning it can be very discouraging because you're putting all this work into it. I mean, for me I got to spend my evenings sending out emails to different people to come on. I don't have a staff, right? I don't have a staff, and I got to write up the interviews because a lot of my guests will request questions in advance, and that's fine. I'm not. This is not a political gotcha program. I want them to feel comfortable, and all I request out of them is to try to make it look like it's not scripted.
Right.
And unfortunately, that doesn't always happen. But yeah, just try to keep it as simple as possible. But there's a lot of work behind the scenes that a lot of people don't realize, and you're going to get discouraged because you're going to put a podcast out there, and if you're expecting 1,000, 10,000 downloads or views, it ain't going to happen unless you're some big name person, right? So, I mean, some of my podcasts are, 25, 30,000 downloads, but I mean, some of them are only a few hundred. It's topic related too.
Sure. And I mean, those are great numbers for anybody, what you just talked
Yeah.
about right now.
Yeah.
You're
No,
like, oh
I
yeah,
know.
it's no big deal. Those are huge numbers for your average podcaster. That's great.
Yeah. Well, that's few and far between. I mean, I probably average closer to 1,000, maybe a little less, but some of them it's rough. I mean, get 200 and then that's a wrap.
Sure.
And because a lot of some of it's time sensitive, especially the news stuff.
Mhm.
You get that 2 to 3 days of traffic and it dies out. Yeah.
So now, do you depend on the subject matter to like pick up and promote the podcast, or do you actively go out and promote through social media or some other kind of program?
Oh yeah. All I use is social media. I have a Facebook page. It's called Infectious Disease News. I don't know. I got 70,000 or so followers on that. Twitter, I don't know. I got about 5,000 maybe. And amazingly, I'm going to tell you, the social media that does the best for me based on, even though I have 70,000 followers on this Facebook page, Infectious Disease News, my LinkedIn page, I get the most activity.
Really?
Really. Because I follow a lot of people that are into this, the science and the diseases,
Oh,
and from all over the world, or they follow me one way or the other.
right.
And yeah, and they're just more engaged than your average Facebook person, right? So I've tried Instagram, and that was an absolute dead end. There's just no activity. If you're not somebody put up bikini pictures, there's nothing going to happen. So I tried, not the bikini, but I tried, and I gave up on that. Yeah.
Well, I know I appreciate that information. I'm sure everybody else does too.
Yeah.
I mean, I've heard people kind of say that about Instagram. So you're not alone there.
Yeah.
And they've all clarified that they weren't wearing the bikini too. So don't
Yeah.
worry. Everybody's got it. But I haven't heard anybody pump up LinkedIn like that as their top thing. But now that I'm thinking about it, it's like, especially with your subject matter, you're involved in that professional community that has that interest in so it makes total sense for
Correct.
you that would
And
make
that,
sense.
and like if as a salesperson, if you
Yeah,
were doing podcasts on sales, that would be a perfect platform too. I believe.
sure. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Wow. Just amazing stuff. All right, let me ask you my corny question. This is my what I tell everybody. It's the corny question because it just seems so trite, but I get great answers, so I keep asking.
Okay.
What do you love the most about doing your podcast and your subject matter and everything else that you're doing? And what do you hate the most about doing the podcast and subject matter?
Love the most is just talking to these people all over the world. That's fantastic. I've interviewed. I mean, this topic doesn't give you a Taylor Swift or a Beyonce or nothing like that. But as far as people that may be known to the average person, especially during COVID, uh, uh, Dr. Peter Hotez, he was seen on cable news a lot. Michael Osterholm. So, I never got Fauci, so I tried, but and then uh, just talking to these experts, and I think what I like the most is after it goes off, it shuts down, and we stay on and talk afterwards. I've had half-hour conversations with some of these men and women about all kinds of different stuff, and the funny thing is so many of them are interested in how'd you get into this. They're like so shocked. It's like, oh no, I just started. I mean, that's it. It's um, nothing complicated about it. Um, but they're just amazed that hey, he's doing a Substack. So I write a lot of, I call it my news blog. Um, it's called outbreaknewstoday.substack.com, and I put out one, two, three stories a day. I try to find news stories that are uh, different than what the mainstream newspapers are covering. I have a good ability to research ministries of health overseas, and I get people from all over the world send me story ideas of something that's going on in their backyard, and some of those I turn into podcasts, and some of them I contact the person for an actual interview, and yeah, it's just a blast. I would say it's the people and just talking to people, and some of them I'm on first name basis with because a lot of them are return guests because things worked out so well. What I hate the most, hate is kind of a strong word.
It's a
What I
strong word. I
dislike,
apologize. Yeah.
yeah, what I dislike the most is prep. Yeah, it
Okay.
just yeah because like I said, a lot of my guests want um, questions in advance. I always offer it because I know that's the gig now, right? Um, just it's that time where I have to sit down and put all that together and then send it to them. And the funny thing is, it depends who you're talking to too. If you're talking from somebody from the university, you're dealing with them straight, one on one, setting it up, whatever. But for example, if I get somebody from the CDC, I'll, I'll see that they authored some paper and I email them. They forward it to their assistant. Then I start going back and forth with the assistant. Then I got to send them the questions. The questions have to be approved.
Uh-huh.
And I mean, the bureaucracy is just off the chart. And actually, one time we had an hepatitis A outbreak here in Florida a few years ago. And they have a great epidemiologist that works on that. So I contacted her. We set up an interview. The state of Florida required me to send the questions. They had to approve them all. Then they had to approve her answers. So it was literally scripted, and you can tell when yeah. But it was a hot topic, so I went with it, and it is what it is. But it all depends who you're dealing with,
Wow.
And yeah,
I mean, I've heard of stuff like that, sort of like in the shadows, but you're telling me like this actually happened and,
oh yeah,
and
yeah,
you
yeah,
saw it with your own eye. Oh my
yeah, yeah, yeah,
God.
yeah, yeah. I
That's
mean,
so ridiculous. Jeez.
yeah. Well, I mean,
I get it.
I assume they just want to make sure their guest is not going to put a blemish on the organization or whatever, and they probably want to make sure that I'm not going to like come out of right field with something off the charts, or So I get it. I get it, but it takes away, some of the fun of it.
Sure. Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure. And there's no real free speech anymore anyway.
No, well,
In a lot of ways,
yeah,
so
not so much. Yeah.
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 But wow. All right. I appreciate you handling that question the way you did. That was something. See,
Okay.
I always get really unique answers to my corny questions, so I'm really glad I asked it.
I didn't think I didn't think it was corny. I thought it was quite appropriate,
Oh well, thank you very much.
especially for podcasters that are just starting out. It's like, yeah, not everything is going to be really fun. It's
Right.
just that's life. That's just life, right? So
Yeah.
you got to take all these things into account if you want to last for any length of time. So
Sure. Now, I have a unique situation here, an opportunity to ask you this last question that I usually ask folks, because I have yet to talk to anybody who's actually been doing it longer than me. So
oh
this is awesome. All right.
okay.
Um, for a new or newer podcaster, okay, getting into the field, wants to do what we're doing, right now. What is your best piece, or pieces, if it has to be more than one, of advice for them on succeeding in this industry?
um, Carve out your niche.
Mm,
I would say that's the way to go. I know a lot of people like to do very general, broad topics. It, Find out what you're really, really interested in. Like I have a friend that does a podcast that's all on pop culture and comic books and that kind of stuff. That's his thing. Diseases is my thing, and it it makes it very, very easy and very, very pleasurable.
hmm,
And also, if if you can, I mean, it's kind of hard today, but years ago, carving out your niche. Uh, I use. Let me put it like this: I used to get more traffic on the podcast 10 years ago than I do now because the competition was less.
ah, yeah,
So, for example, if you go back to 2014, when there was a big Ebola outbreak in Africa, and a couple cases showed up here in the United States, not a whole lot of people were covering that. So those podcasts took off.
right.
Right now, I'm competing with NBC, Sports Illustrated, whoever, anybody that wants to jump into it, right? And I'm serious. It's like I remember doing this stuff, and then all of a sudden, Time Magazine was covered. I'm like, why? Time Magazine never covered this stuff before. What are they doing? So and that just yeah, stomps on your niche a little bit. But yeah, I would say that's the way to go. And make sure you're something you're really interested in, and make sure if you're going to do an interview podcast, those are the kind of people you want to talk to. You don't want to do an interview with somebody who you have no interest in.
For sure.
I don't. I'm saying that to you right now. You're probably thinking, well, but
Um,
no,
I,
I'm just messing with you.
I know you're
But yeah,
messing around because I'm fascinated by this whole thing
yeah,
right now.
but
So
yeah,
it's, yeah,
that's what I would say. I know a lot of people like doing very broad topics, and I don't know if that's really the way to go. I could be 100% wrong, but yeah,
well, I mean, you've been doing it a long time, and
yeah.
you've got three different platforms that you're doing this on, in a
Mhm.
blog, the video, and the audio. So, I mean, you're darn near an expert there, man.
Yeah, well, okay, I'll take it.
You'll take it, huh? All right.
Yeah.
I mean, seriously, I love that you have that kind of experience. I don't get to talk to somebody like that very often. You know what I mean? I
Mhm.
spend a lot of time talking to real new folks. Those are the folks who kind of seek me
Oh,
out
okay,
because of in my field and what I've been doing. But to talk to somebody who's been doing it longer than me is awesome. I mean, Skype,
okay.
for crying out loud. No one even knows what that is. But that's beautiful. That really is
Showing
beautiful.
my showing my age, right?
Oh, I love it. Love it. And then, my last question is just, well, I already said his last question, but I do have one more follow up.
That's okay.
The, with three platforms, you haven't, is it that you haven't wanted to monetize it because it becomes, I mean, for whatever reason, or maybe because it's becomes compromised or something at that point, or,
No, it has nothing to do with being compromised. It's just the effort. I'm not even sure the different ways to monetize a podcast today. I know when I had the radio show, again, it was all my own legwork.
sure.
I had to contact companies myself and see if anybody wanted to advertise on the radio show. Yeah, I had no staff. The radio station wasn't going to do it for me because I wasn't an employee.
Right.
Yeah. So, and I got several people several companies that advertised, and I made some money there. I'm not so when I started podcasting, I never even looked into it, to tell you the truth. So maybe that's something in the future. Maybe after I retire, which is hopefully not too long from now. But yeah, it's just something I really haven't looked at. And like I said, it's a passion that keeps on keeping it going. If there's no passion, it would have died out a long time ago.
Yeah, I love and I'm so encouraged by that answer, to the monetization thing, because I have so many people who get into it and within 3 minutes of talking about starting it, they're literally cutting me off going, well, okay, how do I get ads? How do I make money? How do I monetize? How do I get an advertiser? I'm like,
well, I use Libsyn. I'm sure you're familiar with that, right? Yeah. And they have methods to monetize on there, but I just haven't spent the time to look into it. So I don't.
Right.
Like I said, it wasn't a goal. If it was a goal, I would have already known it, but it hasn't been a goal. So I apologize for not bringing anything better to the table on that. But
I'll be honest with you, that's a great answer.
Okay.
So I love it. On this podcast, we're all about being authentic and real, and that's what I'm trying to get at with podcasters. And you're giving me nothing but that. And honestly, this is fantastic. So subject matter is fascinating, but just you as a podcaster, you're not what I expected at all. And I just
what did you expect, Rory? What did you expect?
I'll be honest with you. I mean, I listen to your podcast and it's about what it's about. And I just expected to be talking to like a very serious, scientist guy, and you're like podcaster guy who happens to talk about, this topic. I mean, the whole bit. So I'm like, wow, look at this guy.
I am a scientist guy, but I'm also a podcaster guy. So
it's great.
just a regular guy. That's all.
I please don't take offense to that. I mean, when you hear that, I'm like, all right, maybe this guy's going to want to talk. Maybe he's not. I don't know. He's obviously a scientist type guy. So, I've never interviewed anybody like that before. This is new. So it was really cool, but it's been great getting to know you. And I hope that you don't lose the passion for it, because I love what you have going, 3 platforms and great subject matter. And it's always going to be relevant to people. It's your niche that you're strong in. You got great contacts. I mean, you're sitting on a gold mine. This could be your retirement plan, brother. Real easy.
It could be. Yeah. Yeah. That's something to look at when I have the time. Yeah.
I love it. Thank you so much for your time today. I know you're on your lunch hour and we're right about where we needed to go target wise. And I've managed to ask all the questions. I can sit here and talk to you about, old time podcasting for probably another hour, but I know you're going to need to go about your life. So,
yeah, pretty much.
Yeah, I appreciate it. So, Robert Herriman of the Outbreak News Interviews podcast. Right.
You got
folks, make sure you catch his show. Robert, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks, Rory.
I'm telling you.
I appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Folks, this has been the Podcaster Nation. This is the podcast that's about podcasters. It's for podcasters, and it's done by podcasters. I'm sure that some of you learned something today, even if all it was just, hey, you know what? What the heck is Skype? Because Robert and I are old school guys. Listen, folks, check out the show. You're going to find an episode somewhere, probably pretty quickly, that is relevant to you, your life, your family, your interests. I was really blown away by how quickly I got into his subject matter. And it's really interesting. It's very informative, and it's presented in a way that anybody can understand it. So you're going to love it. Check it out. This is the podcast where the rising tide raises all ships. So keep sailing. We'll talk to you soon.